Hi, everyone. Thank you for jumping on to the Chicago Prize 2024 webinar. We will be starting in just a couple of minutes. I see lots of attendees are trickling in, so we just want to give everyone time to make their way into the webinar. So we'll get started soon. Thank you. In the meantime, if folks are comfortable with it, we would love for you to enter your name and the name of the organization that you are representing in the chat so we can see who's in the room. All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Chicago Prize 2024 webinar. I see we have a critical mass of folks already in the webinar, so we're going to go ahead and get started. But just as a reminder, this webinar is being recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel. If you or anyone you know misses this particular webinar, there will be a recording of it. And before I kick it off to Cindy Moelis, I just wanted to say, to ask everyone if you are comfortable to please put your name and the organization that you represent in the chat so we can see who's in the room today. And with that, I will ask Cindy Moelis, the president of the Pritzker Traubert Foundation, to take it away.
Hey, good morning, everyone. And thanks for joining us. Thanks for your interest in learning more about the Chicago Prize. It's really exciting for me. This is our third round. I see some of the names in the chat are familiar, some aren't, and that's what makes the Chicago Prize so special, is that it's an open call. You do not have to know Kareeshma or myself or any trustee to be able to put your best foot forward and share your plans. And that was the whole goal when we started this, is that being a small staff foundation, that focuses on increasing economic opportunity in Chicago, we couldn't know everyone. And so by having an open call, we really, really are interested in hearing from people that have great plans who we may never have met before. So thank you for joining us and thank you for learning more about the Chicago Prize. Over the last 5 years, we've listened to a lot of feedback from many of you. We hoped that with Kareeshma's leadership that we have made some minor changes, more transparency, made some tweaks. We're really hoping that we keep getting better at this and we will continue to try to get better. So please, we always appreciate your feedback. As Kareeshma said, if you'd like to share with us who's on the phone, please feel free. We'd love to see who's here, but also you can opt out of that. That is not a requirement. Additionally, if you have questions, you can then enter them into the Q&A box. I'm never sure about the chat and the Q&A box, but the Q&A box is where our webinar folks are telling us to put the Q&A. So depending on the time and the nature of the questions, we may defer them and answer them in our frequently asked questions and send them out to the whole group. Or if we have time and we can address them, we'll try to address them in this webinar. We also are going to have a follow-up webinar on November 18th. If we have enough questions, we're going to definitely try to address more questions at that webinar. So please feel free to put questions in the chat and we'll try to get to them. As many of you know, the Pritzker Traubert Foundation has focused on Chicago. Our giving is primarily in Chicago, and we believe that all Chicagoans should have equal access to economic opportunity. So our goal is to partner with visionary leaders like all of you on the phone to implement your bold plans. Sometimes it's connecting talent to jobs, as in our workforce portfolio, or building an inclusive and growing economy, which we try to do through the Chicago Prize. And we also try to invest in strengthening communities. Besides workforce and community investment, we also invest in democracy and improving journalism, as well as arts and culture in Chicago. Our flagship program has been the Chicago Prize. And many of you know that we started with a simple question, and we continue that same question. How would you invest $10 million of capital to create economic opportunity in your community? And our goal is really to support a real estate development project, but we know it's not just the building. We know it's what's happening in the building, what that building represents, and what that building might encourage throughout the neighborhood. So we're hoping that your plans for whatever you want to build are community-led, and they're catalytic, sustainable, and they help improve the economic, social, and physical well-being of the residents. Many of you may know who our previous grantees were, and we often get questions about what made their idea so special. And with Auburn Gresham, which was our inaugural grantee, they had three components of their project. One was the Healthy Lifestyle Hub, which you can see a picture of in the corner. The other one was an anaerobic digester and an education facility and urban farm called Green Arrow. Two of the three projects have been completed. The Healthy Hub is already serving thousands of patients through their federal qualified health center. The anaerobic digester, I won't go into, but it is a for-profit effort that will, once profitable, put more resources back to the community. So what was very interesting about this particular grantee and their plan was that the money that some of the money from the 10 million went into an investment in the community, which will pay back revenue to the community in the future. I know that many of you know Carlos Nelson and Erica Allen and Jason Feldman, and I know they're always open to questions if you have questions about how they proceeded and how their project went after winning the Chicago Prize. Our second awardee is West Garfield Sankofa Wellness Village. They received this award in 2022, and they broke ground recently on the first big investment that's been made in West Garfield in over 50 years. That is going to be the Sankofa Village Wellness Center. There are three other pieces of the project that will follow: the renovation of the MAC and a new innovation technology center called the K, as well as a community grocery initiative. And we are still working with them, and we are very excited that in a year, we will have this beautiful building that you can see the rendering of in the corner on this page. We also want to highlight the fact that we try to highlight the projects beyond just the recipients of the prize. And in the past, we have had 6 finalists, including the recipient, and the other finalists are offered some matching funds. In the past, it's been $500,000 to get some of their projects off the ground. We have 16 projects that we've funded through the Chicago Prize, and 9 have been completed. And you can see some of those in Englewood, North Lawndale, Austin, Grand Crossing, and South Chicago. So at this time, I'm also going to mention, and I should have mentioned this when we were talking about West Garfield, many of these ideas are collaboratives, and collaboration is really hard, but it's very rewarding when you can pull it together and make it happen, and it allows for multiple projects. So I'm going to turn it over to Kareeshma, and please feel free again to use the Q&A if you have questions, and Kareeshma is going to now talk you through the selection process. Thank you.
Thanks, Cindy. So I'm going to go through a little bit more of the details around Chicago Prize 2024. So I think if you have been following the Chicago Prize process over the last two cycles, this one is going to be at a high level, pretty similar with a few nuance differences, but at a high level, there will be two phases to the selection process, similar to what happened in the last two cycle. There will be a phase one and a phase two cycle. So in phase one, we started the application period on October 15th, and the deadline for submitting phase one applications is December 18th, 2024 at 5 p.m. CST. And we really recommend that folks go onto our website and review all the documentation that is available. There's an FAQs document, there's a resources document, there's a phase one application PDF. There's also a sample phase two application PDF, so you know kind of what's coming if you do end up becoming a finalist. So we really ask that you review these documents because that'll give you a good sense of what it is that we are looking for and the full context of the prize. And we really want to emphasize folks to get into the application portal early and start to submit their application and not wait until the very last day, because as we know, sometimes there are technology glitches, and we want to make sure that we're addressing any challenges that applicants are having, especially with the portal ahead of time. So our recommendation is to not wait until December 18th, but the days leading up to that to get in there and complete your application. And then once applicants submit their application on December 18th, we will go into a review process that I'll share a little bit more about. And then finalists will then be invited to submit phase two proposals. But before we get to phase two, I just want to share with you a little bit about our review process. So the Pritzker Traubert Foundation staff will primarily be managing and participating in the review process, and that also includes our board of trustees. In addition to that, we are going to have application reviewers. So there will be an external group of reviewers that have diverse perspectives. They are community leaders and subject matter experts that are going to be evaluating and scoring each application, and are going to be using the LIFT criteria, which I'm going to go into a little bit later and talk about. And each application will be reviewed by at least 3 external reviewers, and it'll be confidential, so we're not going to be publicizing kind of who's reviewing what application, but know that your application will be reviewed by an external group of reviewers. In addition to that, we also have a due diligence team, which is external to the foundation. And the due diligence team is comprised of real estate development practitioners. They are going to review all the applications and supporting documents that you are submitting in phase one. You will also notice that in phase one, we ask for references, and so they will be conducting reference checks as needed, as well as holding any informational calls that they need to with teams in order to get any additional information. So that is kind of a full view of everyone that will be reviewing your application once you submit it on December 18th. So once the phase one application period is complete and the review is complete, we will identify up to 4 finalists, and those 4 finalists will be invited to submit phase two proposals. So that process we anticipate will start sometime in spring 2025. And the phase two recipients will then have an orientation. So we'll brief them on kind of what phase two entails. And that's when they'll get the official phase two application. Even though there is a phase two application available right now on the website, it won't be substantially different, but there might be subtle changes to it that we'll share at the orientation and the start of phase two. And then the finalists will have about 3 months to complete their proposals. And they are going to receive a planning grant, which I will also go into a little bit later, to cover some of the costs of putting together this proposal. And we anticipate that these proposals will be due sometime in the summer of 2025. And then finally, those 4 finalists that do submit a proposal will then go through another due diligence process, again with the individuals that I mentioned earlier as part of the review team. And this will be a much more in-depth diligencing of proposals. So really getting into the performas and the business plans and conducting site visits and interviews with the full project team. So it will be a lot more in depth than the first review, but the information that we are asking for is going to be much more detailed in phase 2 as well, and will reflect that. And then finally, once this due diligence of proposals is complete and the interviews and site visits are complete, the review team will come together and make a selection of the Chicago Prize recipient. And we anticipate this to happen around fall of 2025. And just one thing to note in terms of the final recipient that is selected, they will be entering into a memorandum of understanding agreement with the foundation before anything is made public, but that will we'll get into those details depending on the type of projects that are selected and the organization. So there's a lot of contextual information that needs to be considered before we go into any grant agreements with the recipient, but that will come much later. In terms of the awards that are available that I mentioned, there will be planning grants for the finalists of up to $150,000. And we recognize that this may not cover the full amount that it will cost to put together a proposal. But $150,000 is the grant that we are able to provide to recognize that this does require significant time and energy from the applicants to put together these proposals. And then the final recipient will get $10 million. And again, this will be contingent on a grant agreement that we'll put together, which will depend on the nature of the projects that are selected and the organizations. And then there is a lot more detail in the application overview that talks about how that money will be dispersed within the 5 years. But just one thing to note is that no more than $5 million will be able to be dispersed in the first year of the grant. And then you will have 5 years in total for the full disbursement of the $10 million. One of the questions that we wanted to make sure that we highlight is the difference between initiatives and project. So you may have noticed that in the documents that are available on the website, we often use the term initiative as well as the term project. And these are two kind of related but different terms that we wanted to make sure to highlight. So when we are talking about an initiative, it's a comprehensive vision that comprises one or more real estate projects, and they can either be at a single location or across multiple sites. So as Cindy mentioned, the previous recipients, both in Auburn Gresham as well as West Garfield Park, the projects are located in multiple sites, but they all fall under one initiative. And so we want to make sure that folks are really being thoughtful about the initiative that they are applying with. I've had a few people approach me and talk to me about a specific project. And the one thing I would recommend is that if you have a specific project, for example, a restaurant on a corridor that you're thinking about applying with, consider what other projects are going on in the neighborhood. Consider what other larger developments are going on in the neighborhood, and thinking about what a holistic proposal looks like, what a holistic application looks like in a project team, as opposed to just focusing on single projects. And the single projects are really individual, distinct development projects that come together to form the full initiative. So in Auburn Gresham, as you heard, there's the Healthy Lifestyle Hub, which is a single project. There is the Anaerobic Digester, which is a single project. And then there's also the educational facility and the urban farm, which is its own project. But these projects have come together very thoughtfully. There is this through line of health and wellness across all of these, and sustainability that they're thinking about. And so they brought these projects together with these different partnerships to form one larger initiative called the Always Growing Auburn Gresham Initiative. So our recommendation is to really be thinking about kind of the full initiative and the vision that the community has come together to move forward. There's Probably a lot of questions around team roles and responsibilities, and this is not very different from the last two cycles. However, we're trying to be a little bit more explicit about the team roles and responsibilities that will be expected of the recipient, the team that is ultimately the recipient. So one of the things that we ask for is a lead agency, and this lead agency is the one that's going to basically serve as the main conduit between the foundation and the full project team. So we want the lead agency to be a 501c3, but they are the ones that are going to be managing all the fiduciary responsibilities that are articulated in the grant agreement. As well as if there is a fiscal agent used, if it's not the lead agency, then they will be the ones coordinating with that fiscal agent as necessary. The lead agency is also the entity that's going to be making sure that all the projects are on track and that everyone is meeting the deadlines that they're supposed to, and that everyone is kind of abiding by the things that were set forth in the grant agreement that we ultimately get to. And as I mentioned, they're the primary liaison between the foundation and the project team. So they're the ones that are managing communications between the team members. And they're also the ones that are working with the foundation on all reporting and impact assessment processes. And the primary goal is that the foundation really needs kind of one point person or an entity that is serving as the point person for this larger initiative. So that rather than thinking about each of these individual projects as piecemeal projects and not needing to kind of track down each individual project team member to get updates, this lead agency is really serving as that project manager for the entire initiative and really going to be the one that's kind of stewarding the larger vision. And in terms of reporting and impact assessment processes, there will be some reporting requirements as per the grant agreement. In addition to that, this was mentioned in the overview, but we will be undergoing a learning agenda process where we will be working with an external consultant to understand the impact of the Chicago Prize and the real estate development projects. And so this lead agency will be responsible for working with that external consultant and then providing them with the reporting that they need, and then also providing the foundation with any of the reporting that it needs. And then this brings up us to the project team members. So again, going back to this idea of a larger initiative and smaller projects within that initiative. So the project team members will really be the folks that are kind of spearheading these individual projects. And so they will be managing all the responsibilities that are assigned to them based on the grant agreement. They are going to be the ones that are working with the lead agency and the team members to execute on their proposals vision, ensuring that their projects are on track and meeting the expectations of the grant agreement. We expect that these folks will be attending quarterly check-ins with the foundation. So while the lead agency will communicate with the foundation on a bi-weekly basis or as needed basis, the project team members will have less frequent check-ins, but will be more responsible for checking in more regularly with the lead agency and more quarterly with the foundation and including any kind of updates and milestones and any issues that are coming up. And they are going to be working with the lead agency on the learning agenda and the learning agenda partner to, again, co-create a plan, collect and track data as needed. So again, lead agency is kind of the main liaison, and then the project team members are connected to the individual projects that are part of the initiative. I think Cindy has something to add to this point, so I'm going to let her speak.
Hi, guys. Sorry, I now have to lower my hand. I just want to make it clear, the learning agenda that we're talking about is not typical of what an evaluation is or anything like that. It really is something we do with our partner, who is the community groups, jointly pick a group that feels comfortable to everybody. And our goal is really to track information and help the organization that's working in the community to get feedback in real time. So it also is not something, in the past, we had included in the 10 million. It is no longer included. The 10 million goes into the project while additional resources will be put into the learning agenda. But I just want to be clear that this is not something that should feel at all evaluative. It should be more of a learning loop with the folks on the ground doing the work. Kareeshma, I'm sorry to interrupt it. I was just listening to the last segment and I just wanted to be, clarify that a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's a great clarification. I think that is definitely uh I think that's absolutely right, is that we don't want to think about the learning agenda as kind of this evaluative piece as opposed to this. That's why we intentionally called it a learning agenda, because it is more about the foundation learning as well as the teams, the project teams learning as well, kind of what things are working, what's not working, how do we kind of pivot as needed. So it is definitely an iterative and collaborative process. And one of the things I wanted to highlight going back to this, the lead agency, is that because there is such a heavy project management component to the lead agency, that is something to consider and be really mindful of in choosing a lead agency as part of your initiative, because they are going to need a lot of internal capacity to manage something of this scale, not only in terms of communicating and providing updates to the foundation, but even kind of facilitating communication between the different project team members and making sure all the reporting is on track and kind of all the checks are in place. And so really thinking about what does that internal capacity look like, and what organization has that internal capacity to be able to take on the role as a lead agency. We're going to move on to talking a little bit about the selection criteria. I know these are questions that we get asked a lot in terms of how are you going to be what are you really looking for when you're looking for grantees? How are you going to be making these selections? So similar to the past two cycles, we will be using the LIFT criteria to select grantees, and we'll go through, it's an acronym, we'll go through what each of those letters mean. So the first one is leverage. So we are looking for initiatives that leverage the Chicago Prize grant by 3 to 5 times to attract additional public and private investment. What that means, in other words, is that the ideal total development cost that we are looking for is between $30 to $50 million, because the Chicago Prize is a $10 million investment, that the total project cost kind of in a sweet spot would be 30 to 50 million. Now, that's not to say that if you have a $25 million project or a $60 million project that you are disqualified by any means, but this is really kind of the range that we have found works really well and is manageable. It's not too large, and it's not too small in terms of how we're defining catalytic and thinking about what the developments are that are going to spur further investment in the community. So the leverage piece is really thinking about the size and scale of the development, and who the other investors and funders are within this development as well. Now, impact is a really big one, but that is probably the one that folks are probably going to feel the fuzziest about. So there's different ways that we've tried to define what impact means for us in the overview documents as well as the FAQ. So I would really recommend folks to read through those. But we are really looking for initiatives that, again, set a vision for creating sustained and significant economic opportunity in the community and have a catalytic potential for attracting additional investment. Now, impact can look very different depending on the context that you're in. And we're really asking people to think about the community that they are in and what positive impact looks like in that community. And your orientation for that might be towards, housing or arts and culture or creating jobs or sustainability. All of those things can have a positive impact in the community and can be a part of the initiative. However, I would say that because the foundation's mission is really focused on economic opportunity, we would expect to see a lot of intersectionality between kind of whatever the focus of the initiative is. With economic opportunity. How is this particular development going to create economic opportunity and wealth for individuals in the community as well as the community as a whole? And so again, we're trying to be very expansive in that definition. So for some folks, economic opportunity could mean creating jobs in the community. For some, it might be introducing more businesses in the community. Others might be thinking about kind of community investment vehicles and how to build more community ownership with residents. And so we kind of want to Oh, I see a question that says the speaker's screen has gotten large and the slide is minimized. I'm not sure that I have made a change. So I'll ask our tech folks to take a look at that while I continue. So we're really trying to be expansive in our definition of economic opportunity, and really allowing people to tell us what makes the most sense in their particular context in their neighborhood. And one of the reasons that we're actually doing that is because we're also not sure. We don't want to assume that we know what types of projects we're going to get. In 2020, as Cindy mentioned, one of our proposals, which was the recipient, was in Auburn Gresham, and they proposed an anaerobic digester. Before the Chicago Prize was launched, we would never have guessed that we were going to get an anaerobic digester as one of the projects. But it was something very innovative and something that, again, is bringing a lot of economic opportunity into the community and building wealth in the community. And that is something that we could not have planned for. And so that's part of the reason that we want to make sure that we're being really expansive in how we think about what economic opportunity looks like, and we're really looking for folks to tell us what economic opportunity looks like in their community. And then this point about being catalytic again is really tied to also this leverage piece. So there's a reason why we're not as inclined to fund kind of small scale developments, even though they are really important to the fabric of a neighborhood. We want to make sure that the projects that we are funding are really catalytic and inspire further investment, whether it's by the city, whether it's by other kind of private investment. We just want to make sure that we are we're creating developments that have that catalytic potential. And so we've actually seen that happen now with both Auburn Gresham as well as West Garfield Park. So Auburn Gresham has garnered kind of a lot of local and national and international attention. And so that's been kind of really catalytic in its own regard, and inspired further development in Auburn Gresham. And then West Garfield Park, we're already seeing other kind of investment pop up throughout the neighborhood as well, as a result of or in conjunction with some of the investment that the Chicago Prize has made. And then the third criteria that we're looking at is feasibility. So having a credible plan for designing, funding, and managing the successful construction of the projects, and having at least one anchored project that can break ground within 18 months of being awarded the grant. So this is especially important, and something we want to emphasize this time is this feasibility aspect. So we know that there are other grants and funding sources that are available that are more for early stage ideas. I just want to be really explicit to say the Chicago Prize is really not an early stage idea granting opportunity. So we are really looking for projects that are shovel ready and ready for this type of investment. And we've outlined what some of those, what it really looks like to have an investment ready or shovel ready project. And some of those things are listed in the overview document as well as the FAQs. But some of the things that include having site control, or at least having a very clear path to site control, and having kind of a part of your capital stack already in place. If you are a project that is just kicking, or an initiative that's just kicking off the ground, and you have you're expecting this $10 million grant to be the first kind of injection into the capital stack, more than likely it's not in a place where it's feasible and ready to break ground within 18 months of being awarded the grant. If you don't have site control, or at least a clear path to site control, again, it's likely not feasible that you are going to be able to break ground within 18 months of being awarded the grant. And so this is kind of some of the markers that we're using to define feasibility. We want to make sure that we have projects that are really ready to go and have really gotten far enough along in their development process to be able to absorb $10 million of grant funding pretty immediately.
Richmond, do you mind if I add to that?
Oh, please, yeah.
So I don't want to discourage people who have projects in different stages. So for example, there's still a project that we're working with Auburn Gresham on because it's a 5-year grant. And we understand the impact might take up to 10 years or more. So Kareeshma is absolutely being very clear because she wants at least one of your projects and probably your primary project to be ready to break ground in 18 months. You may have other projects like in West Garfield, which will follow that and complement it and keep the momentum going that might have a little longer timeline. But I think the goal is really that the main thing you're trying to accomplish in your community with your catalytic plans is closer to getting done. I would also say that we've been asked in the past if this is the last dollar in. It really hasn't been last dollar in. What it's done for the two communities that have gotten the prize is that it's allowed them to de-risk some other money coming in. So whether that's banks or new market tax credits or the city, we have really been in the middle or towards the 75% of the stack. And what our money has done, because it's no risk, no cost capital, is it's de-risked some of the other players who would want to come in if it was a little bit less risky to come in. So I just want to be clear that we are not looking to be the last dollar in. We are looking for somebody to have a plan, if they were to get an infusion of $10 million, how they would build that capital stack out with that no risk capital.
Mhm. Thank you, Cindy. That's really helpful clarification. And then the last part of the LIFT criteria is team. So we are really looking for initiatives that are led by teams with community-based leadership, real estate development expertise, and organizational capacity to successfully implement the initiative. So I want to talk about each one of these things. So community-based leadership is really key for us. So sometimes in a lot of communities on the south and west side, we see a development that happens, but is really coming in kind of from an external place and with not a lot of community input or even being driven by folks that have roots in the community. We are really looking for community-led and community-based leadership to be a strong kind of anchor part of these projects. So that's going to be really key for us. And there's a lot instances in the application where we ask for evidence of that. One is certainly kind of who's in your project team. Who is the lead agency? Who are the other members of the team? Kind of what connection do they have to the community? What credibility do they have with the community? What is their kind of track record in working on other projects within the community? These things are really important to the Chicago Prize and kind of a strong tenet of what we're looking for. The second piece of this, and then just to say one more piece about that, that doesn't mean that the entire team has to be based within the community. But again, we want to see that the community is really being centered in the process and has a strong kind of decision-making power. So even in the last couple of the prizes, you'll notice, GAGDC, which is the Greater Auburn Gresham Development Corporation, has been in the community for a long time in Auburn Gresham and is very community-based, and they are the lead agency for that particular project. And then in West Garfield Park, we have the West Garfield Park Right to Wellness Collaborative, which is made up of a number of members, including the community builders who are not from West Garfield Park, but then we have lots of community-based leadership like Marshall Hatch Jr. and his father who are from the neighborhood. We also have Kristen Freeman and Jim Webb, who are strong leaders within the neighborhood. We also have Westside United as a strong partner, but then we also have institutional partners as part of that collaborative, which is Rush and Erie and the Y. So it's really thinking about what the right mix of the team is, but again, making sure that there is a lot of centering and that it is being rooted in the community that the project is located in. The second piece of this is real estate development expertise. So these are really complex deals. These are really complicated real estate development projects. And I would say the one of the things that we've learned in the last two cycles is the importance of having real estate development expertise on the team because these projects take a long time. There's a lot of interactions with a lot of different groups that are needed, whether it's new market tax credits or whether it's working through city development processes, even working kind of within the partnerships of the project team. And so having that real estate development expertise on the project is really important. That's not to say that the lead agency has to be the developer, but again, making sure that you are bringing in the real estate development expertise that you need. So for example, in West Garfield Park, the Community Builders has really strong real estate development expertise and is a strong partner within that project. And then finally, organizational capacity. So again, this goes back to some of the responsibilities that we talked about with pertaining to the lead agency as well as the project team. Because there is so much being asked in terms of coordination and reporting, and just kind of keeping track of the projects as they move along, organizational capacity becomes really important. And so we want to make sure that the lead agency especially, but even the project team members have the capacity to kind of see these projects come to fruition. Because again, these are very long-term projects that are going to take years. This is a 5-year grant period. And so we want to make sure that the team has the capacity to be able to kind of stay with the shared vision and move it along. So these are the 4 different criteria that, again, our review team will be looking at as they're reviewing the applications. And they are, there's different kind of cues that we've mentioned in the application for each one of these pieces, and have provided a lot more detail in the FAQs as well as the overview, so you can get a thorough understanding of kind of what we're looking for. So with that, we'll kind of open it up and see if there are any questions. But in addition to that, I also want to say that you can submit questions to the Chicago Prize at ptfound.org. You can also review the FAQs document on the website that we will be updating once we have questions from this session as well as kind of outside of this session. So we'll regularly try to update that as we're receiving more questions. And then again, as Cindy mentioned, that we are going to have a webinar on November 18th, where we will be addressing some questions live, as well as going through some of the questions that have been coming up over the last several weeks. So I'm going to check in and see if we have any questions that we can answer right now. So one of the questions is, if our project is in the late stages, nearly completed and operational, but still requiring capital funding, is this award suitable for us? So Cindy, I think you can, if you're able to chime in, that would be great. But I would say the short answer to this is yes, that you can still submit an application. But I guess actually, if it says nearly completed and operational, I guess one nuance to that question would be if it's under construction or not, or if you're still looking for kind of the remaining capital stack to be filled. Cindy, do you want to take this one on?
You know, part of our dilemma in trying to be as transparent and not discourage people, but encourage people is that until we really see what you're talking about, it's hard for us to answer one-offs. I would say that if something's closer to completion and needs some capital infusion, there probably should be a bigger plan than just that one building. It's okay if you have sort of catalytic ideas in a region or a community. It doesn't have to be one neighborhood, it could be a region, but you're tying them together somehow. There's, you know, as we talked about with Auburn Gresham, there were these 2 or 3 big ideas that were tied together under an umbrella with a team. Same thing in West Garfield. So I would say part of your application could be retiring debt on one building, but I don't think it's sufficient to rise to the level of being catalytic and innovative if it's kind of an already done piece. So I hope that sort of answers the question. I also want to make sure we answered one question through typing. Somebody asked about lead agencies. You know, we're starting to learn more and more how much we rely on these lead agencies to kind of be the liaison. So there is an element of these lead agencies that probably needs to have some sort of backbench, to have some sort of staff, to have a record in the community and some trust. So the first Auburn Gresham was Greater Auburn Gresham's CGC, which is run by Carlos Nelson. And I think Kareeshma talked about the collaborative that's happening in West Garfield. The collaborative in West Garfield is more nascent. It's probably struggling a little bit more to make sure all the partners are together. So we would probably look towards in the future something with more of a track record in terms of the lead agency.
There is another question about that says, can finalists submit to the 2027 prize? So if we don't win but become a finalist, could we resubmit for the next Chicago prize if we are eligible? So one, I will say we don't know if there's a 2027 prize or 2026 prize or whatever. So we don't know. But what I will say about this is that for this particular round, finalists from previous cycles are allowed to apply again. Whether it's in the same kind of with the same teams or different teams or whatever the configuration is, but finalists are permitted to apply again as part of the Chicago Prize. And if there is a future Chicago Prize, and if you become a finalist this time, then I assume that you will be able to apply again as a to the future Chicago Prize. But don't hold me to that because we don't know if there will be a future Chicago Prize.
I'm going to be a little more optimistic. I'm going to say if this is what we hope it to be and what we think it is, and there is demand out there for this kind of effort, that we will convince our trustees to keep going forward. We've been really, really excited by the ideas that have come forward. We're really excited about doing it for a third time. And we're hoping that the pipeline every couple of years both builds on previous years, because maybe in 2020 you were a nascent idea, but now 3 or 4 years later you are, ready for that 10 million. So we're hopeful that past applicants, new applicants are going to put their application back in with a lot more detail and a lot more energy and a lot more forward movement. But I can honestly say that this has been one of the privileges of me working at this foundation, and the trustees are very excited by the Chicago Prize. So if we were able to prove to them that there is a need and there is a pipeline and there is a desire by people in the community to keep moving forward, then we believe that there will be. We'll call it probably 2026, but you're right, it probably won't be awarded until 2027.
There is another question, but I seem to have lost my window.
Mentioned that having a solid team is one of the key elements needed. Can we use the grant funding to fund the critical leaders of the project team? So the answer is yes, that some of the money can go to capacity building, staff capacity increase, it's not really an administrative fee because it's really the leadership of that organization that's moving the project forward. But a majority, I believe, Kareeshma, that there's some language about the percentage that has to go for capital, but then there is also, you can put into your grant request money for the project management.
Yeah, so we have said that no more than 10% can be allocated to non-capital costs. So if you do need additional money for capacity building, for example, or administrative costs, please include that in your budget and make sure that it's no more than 10% of the grant amount.
There's another question, Kareeshma. Can municipal agencies be on the team like park district, CPS, and libraries? And the answer is yes, that the parks, in fact, one of the finalists has a library going in, and that was a piece of their capital. So usually the city and state are part of the capital stack. They can be partners in the sense that they are providing some significant resources to get the project done. I'm not sure that completely answers whether they're on the team or not, but they are definitely important players in the project.
Are there any other questions? I'm not able to see. Actually, yes, I am. We'll give it another minute and see if there's any other questions.
While we're giving it one more minute, I just really want to encourage people that if you are in the middle of a big plan for your community and you need these resources, I'm encouraging you to try phase 1 at least. We were trying to make phase 1 enough of a process that you'd get a really good hearing and we'd understand what you're trying to do, but not make it as onerous as the phase 2 planning that only finalists and the planning grants will be used for. But we really do want to keep encouraging the pipeline and keep sharing with other funders what we're finding. One thing Kareeshma didn't mention is that a lot of the advisors who read these applications are other funders who fund in these areas. And we're hopeful that by sharing your ideas with them, even if it's not through the Chicago Prize, that they get excited and maybe you have more exposure and some folks who might want to fund outside the Chicago planning prize process.
Yeah. The other resource I would just direct people to is that I think we're going to add or have added some links into the chat. One will take you again to our website, which has a number of resources such as all the documents that we've been kind of referencing. But also, if you go to our YouTube channel, the Pritzker Traubert YouTube channel, there's a number of practitioner perspective videos. And those are from previous cycles, but they're still extremely relevant. So there's videos on kind of the development process, the stages to be aware of. There's how to build a team and thinking about capacity building. So there's a number of really helpful kind of tips and guides from previous finalists and recipients as well. So I would really encourage you to take a look at that, as well as all the documents that are available on our website. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Cindy.
I can tell you there were a couple more questions.
So one of the questions is there another avenue for an early stage initiative to connect with the prize and foundation? I think I guess Cindy, please chime in or correct me. But I would say that for the Chicago Prize in particular, we again are not really inclined to be looking for early stage initiatives. But again, I think as Cindy has mentioned, if you want to still do a phase 1 application, it's not as heavy of a lift. So I would encourage that. I would also say that there's a number of other funding opportunities that are still more early stage focused. So for example, CCT, the Chicago Community Trust, has a pre-development fund. That's a good place for that. And then there might be other kind of funders out there that are looking for more early stage initiatives as well. Cindy, I don't know if there's more to add about that.
No, it really depends on how early stage it is. I mean, if you're just in planning, then it's probably not a good use of your time to put in for phase 1. But if you're further along than that and you feel like you have some strong components in here, I would encourage you. I mean, if we find ways to connect you to other funders, we will do that. We've also in the past tried to highlight some of the good ideas through a brochure or through an event. We still haven't figured out if we're going to have an event in 6 or 8 months, but I would encourage you to share it with us, and we will share it with others if it's not quite ready for the Chicago Prize.
So then there's another question that says, I understand it's more than the building. Are proposals more favorable when they are funding programs within the building? Or should folks be looking for regional? I assume they mean for the program's reach. So I think it's a both and. So I think that this is the part where we're actually looking for you to tell us how you're defining impact and what that impact is. So I think that if you look back at our other 2 recipients, they certainly have programs within the buildings that are built. So, social services, there's FQHCs in both cases, actually. And then there's also for-profit entities that are involved in each of these developments as well. And in terms of whether the reach is regional or within the neighborhood itself, I think we are open to both. Again, it's about making a case for why this particular development is going to bring more economic opportunity to that particular neighborhood. But again, we're interested in the region as well. So if you have an idea for how this particular development is going to have a regional reach, I think we would be more than excited to consider that as well.
I would also add that if you want to look at the finalists, you should understand that all of those finalists' idea rose to the level of, more scrutiny, a second look, a matching grant. So for example, Exchange in Greater Grand Crossing is really a regional workforce play in terms of getting people from all over the region into new jobs, tech jobs. So that's a very different model than, maybe the Auburn Gresham Healthy Hub or the Auburn Gresham Anaerobic Digester. we're trying to be open to your ideas. That's why we're not putting very specifics down. We're really trying to say, we don't know what will make the most impact and help the residents in your community. We're really open to you telling us. So we apologize if that feels vague, but we are really open to new ideas that we haven't thought about yet. Again, I think Kareeshma mentioned, who would have thought an anaerobic digester cleaning up 10 acres of brownfield in a community would have been part of the first Chicago Prize plan, but it's turned into a very impactful idea out in that community. Thank you, guys.
I don't see any more questions. So again, some of the questions that were asked today, we will, just for the sake of kind of everyone that's visiting our website and the FAQ documents, we'll be updating our FAQ documents and adding some of these questions to that. So we've taken note of those. And then of course, if you have additional questions, please send them to the email address. And you can also visit or join our webinar on November 18th for additional clarifications as needed. Or any additional questions that come up. And I would really recommend folks, if you haven't already, to download the PDF of the application on our website and start to look at some of those questions, because you might have some additional questions when you start to really fill out the application for phase 1, and maybe even look at phase 2 application to see kind of what's forthcoming.
Also, I should mention that we did a city club, and there's a live stream with Marshall and with Carlos talking about their projects. Just to be clear, some of the impact you're leaving and some of the community wealth may be that you're owning the building at the end of the day. So we just want you to understand that we acknowledge that as a really important community asset and a wealth building asset. We'd like you to think beyond that, but that in itself is very important.
Yeah.
I think we're done, Kareeshma.
Yeah, I think so. Thank you all for joining us, and we look forward to seeing your applications.
Thank you, guys.